Greetings to all of those of you who are joining me for this devotional here from Sunset Ministry here in San Francisco. My name is Jeffrey Finger. I'm the worship leader for our church, and it falls to me to provide another devotional thought for this particular episode of our devotional video ministry. I'm going to ask you to consider with me for a few minutes another of my favorite parables, this time for a slightly different reason. It occurs in the Gospel of Luke, chapter 18, and I'm going to start reading in verse 9. And it's the parable of the Pharisee and the tax collector. Uh, some of you might recognize this particular episode in Christ's public ministry. Others of you might not. I think you'll find it interesting. So here is what we find there in Luke 18, verse 9. Jesus also told this parable to some who were confident that they were righteous and looked down on everyone else. Two men went up to the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood and prayed about himself like this: God, I thank you that I'm not like other people, extortionists, unrighteous people, adulterers, or even like this tax collector apparently motioning to one in the public square. I fast twice a week. I give a tenth of everything I get. The tax collector, however, stood way off, wouldn't even look up to heaven, but beat his breast and said, God, have mercy on me, a sinner that I am. And Jesus said, I tell you that this man went down to his home justified rather than the Pharisee. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but he who humbles himself will be exalted. And the reason I find this interesting is because his hearers, those who gathered about him and those to whom he was teaching and articulating the nature of the gospel and how it changes our lives, it's a very interesting dynamic going on because you have people who he's teaching who are identifying with one of these two figures in the story, in the parable. And it's very telling who it is that we identify with. Typically, you would say to yourself, well, of the two figures in this parable, I identify with the publican, the sinner who is standing in the hour of prayer there, not even looking up to heaven, kind of beating his breast in humility, recognizing the nature of his brokenness. And he's praying, God, have mercy on me. Now, there's a problem with that. In some ways, this is, I won't say a trick parable, but it has the same effect as being a bit of a great revealer. By identifying with the publican, we reveal ourselves to be the Pharisee. It's sort of like watching an old Western and saying to yourself, or in terms of who you resonate with, that you're identifying with the sheriff who rides in and saves the day. You identify with the good guy. A lot of people always tend to elevate King David as opposed to King Saul, who was considered a broken king. Or in the telling of Mary and Martha, Martha being busy about taking care of the kitchen and all the guests when Mary is sitting at Jesus' feet, and Mary is elevated as doing the right thing or as doing the better thing. But here in this parable, when we identify with the publican, we reveal ourselves to be the Pharisee. Because if we were honest with ourselves, we'd recognize that when push comes to shove, we really have a lot more in common with the Pharisee, the one standing there going, boy, am I glad I'm not like that other guy. And so there had to have been a number of aha moments or revealing moments for people who came to realize that Jesus had just exposed them with this parable, revealing them to be the very figure that they were trying or would see themselves as trying to avoid being. And that's the Pharisee. Whereas for all of us, I think the more honest answer is to recognize that we're the one standing in the public square casting judgment. And it's only when we realize our need for the amazing grace of God that we can be addressed, we can be healed in that regard and in that way. It's why Jesus says the first should be last and the last first. It's only when you realize that you're the last, you're kind of lowest on the totem pole, when you realize and identify with and embrace your own brokenness, your own need for the grace and redemption of God, that you are now in a place that you can receive it. And that's what Jesus is saying. That's where I hope we can all find ourselves today, that we do need God and we need to lead with the weakness that prevails in our lives so that at that very point we can be changed. We shall glory in our weaknesses, not in our strengths. Hope you have a blessed day.